Hey, it's Pete Thorne. So if you're like me and you're a Van Halen obsessed guitar nut, and you were in 1990 or 1991, perhaps you remember seeing this for the very first time. This is the very first Music Man Van Halen signature guitar ad that appeared in guitar magazines. So keep in mind, this is pre-internet. This is a time where this is how we got guitar news. It was all about the magazines. Guitar World, Guitar for the Practicing Musician, Guitar Player Mag, Young Guitar over in Japan. This is how we found out about things in guitar land in the early 90s. So this ad was a shocker, I think, for a lot of Van Halen fans on a couple of different levels. Number one, from the time that I grew up playing guitar, which was the early 80s, I'd always known Eddie to be with Kramer guitars. The two things were like synonymous, Van Halen, Kramer guitars. So it was a big deal that he was switching away from the brand to a different guitar brand. But number two, the guitar was so different looking in the advertisement to what we'd seen or what we were accustomed, at least in the public eye, to seeing Van Halen play. Van Halen was the guy that really put the partsocaster on the map. I mean, there was other players maybe in the early 70s, mid 70s, late 70s that had modified their guitars. Steve Morse comes to mind. He had a crazy telly that he'd added a bunch of pickups to. But Eddie was really the guy that put the DIY, partsocaster super strat thing on the map. Guitars literally looked different going into the 80s because of Eddie's influence. I mean, the whole striped kind of, kit guitar and slanted humbucker in the bridge in a Strat and adding a Floyd Rose to it, and just the idea that you could kind of switch out necks and pickups and things randomly and have fun with it. That had a big impression on guitar players like me. Literally remember, having a body cut out of wood and buying a kit neck, having the whole thing painted at an auto body shop with crazy stripes, bolting a humbucker onto it, putting it all together myself and thinking, yeah, I can do this. If he can do it, then I can do it. Up till that point, I think most people were just going to the store and buying a Strat or buying a Les Paul. So the guitar that was in the ad was kind of a shocker because it looked sort of, dare I say, more like a traditional guitar that you would buy at the store. It had a flame top on it, first of all, kind of a flat top hybrid telly body kind of looking thing, but it looked very nice. It had a neck pickup. That was a departure. So there was a bunch of things about this guitar that were quite different than what we were seeing Eddie Van Halen do, at least like in the public eye. And it all kind of makes sense in retrospect. It's like we know he had 59 Les Pauls, and he had a beautiful Flying V that he played on the track Hot for Teacher and other songs. He played other guitars besides the Super Strats. Eventually we all embraced the guitar and kind of got used to it, and I started lusting after one, pretty quickly. But I never actually got a hold of one, and I've always wanted to check one out. So one recently has kind of fallen on my lap, and here it is. This is a 92 or 93 EVH Music Man signature guitar. You can see it's still got the plastic on the back plates. I mean, this is like a really minty example. It's almost like a time capsule. And you saw me play it on the track at the beginning of the video. Of course, that was a recreation of the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge song Runaround, which is a great showcase of this guitar. You can hear the bridge pickup tone all the way through the tune, but then when we get to the solo of the song, part of why I chose it, because he hits the neck pickup. Eddie and neck pickups was not something we were really used to hearing on record, at least commonly up till that point. But here he was playing the neck pickup and doing like basically most or the whole solo on the neck pickup. So that's part of why I chose to play it at the beginning of the video, because it really showcases the guitar. And I think the album, actually, the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge album, was a great showcase for these guitars and kind of introducing the world to them. Really, really good sounding record produced by Andy Johns. There's more bottom end on that record than we're maybe used to hearing on Van Halen records. Just a really, really cool sounding record. So that probably lent to people's interest in the guitars even more, I think, around that time. So this video is going to be all about these guitars, the Music Man Van Halen model. I think just from a historical perspective, it's an interesting story to tell. It's a neat period in Van Halen history, that 90 and 91 through 95 period. Also, I want to tell the story of this guitar in particular, how it kind of fell on my lap, how I have it here today, and I'm going to enlist the help of my friend Simon to tell that story. Okay, here we go. So how did the relationship between Kramer and Van Halen end, and he ends up going to Music Man? Well, there's a great article online written by Sterling Ball where he kind of speaks to all of this, so we're taking his word as gospel here. Basically, they were producing a set of Ernie Ball's signature strings, the 5150 strings, for Van Halen. But these were actually a Kramer product, so Ernie Ball made them for cost, and then they sent them to Kramer. Kramer was then responsible for all the distribution, marketing, and royalties being paid to the Van Halen camp. So at at some point there's a dispute between Van Halen and Kramer over the royalties for these strings, and that really was the nail in the coffin for the relationship. So now Van Halen and Kramer are Splitsville, but Ernie Ball's in the mix because, of course, they were making these signature strings, and Sterling says to the Van Halen business management, hey, why don't you let us make you some guitars and see what you think? So that gets their foot in the door. They end up making a silhouette model, which is kind of their super strat style model, but they ended up striping it and putting a single humbucker in the bridge and a Floyd, kind of like they thought Ed would want. Evidently, he was not impressed. That's not what he wanted. But at least it got the ball rolling. Now, how the unique design of the guitar actually came about, I'm not actually sure. Eddie evidently drew up some shapes, but those were quickly sort of disregarded early on in the process. Larry DiMarzio actually says, I think he was happy to turn the body design over to Music Man and make corrections from there. So at some point they end up with the kind of unique hybrid telly sort of looking body design. Now, the design of the pickups is really interesting. Evidently, different companies were kind of competing to be a part of this guitar and, you know, have their pickups be the ones featured in the guitar, with the main two players being DiMarzio and Seymour Duncan. Eddie's favorite pickup at that time was the pickup that was in his 5150 Kramer guitar, and evidently was a broken Seymour Duncan Jeff Beck. So supposedly the high E had gotten caught under the edge of one of the coils at some point of this pickup, and the sound changed in a way Eddie liked. A standard JB has a DC resistance of about 16.4K ohms. One coil on this pickup read 8K, so that's about right. 8 plus 8 is 16, right? But the other coil on this pickup in the 5150 read 160K. So this led DiMarzio to believe that one coil was functioning, well, it was still working, but it was functioning as an inductor as well as a standard coil. So Larry DiMarzio finds out about this and says, like, great, we're going to make Eddie a damaged pickup. So that wasn't really an option. So they set about just making something that sounded good that he would like. Now, initially, the neck pickup that he was digging in prototypes for this guitar was a Seymour Duncan Custom. It's a little contradictory because Eddie, evidently, one of the reasons he had a problem with neck pickups in guitars and why he always just used a single one was he always felt like if you EQ the amp for the bridge pickup, then the neck pickup sounds weird. So you would think, oh, well, that means that probably the amp is EQ'd for the brighter bridge pickup. Maybe we need to make a brighter, clearer neck pickup. But evidently the first ones that DiMarzio came up with for the guitar weren't the right thing at all. And when you think about a Duncan Custom Alnico 2 magnet, kind of a hot pickup, that's a pretty warm, dark pickup. So one thing DiMarzio hypothesized was that Eddie seemed to like the degaussed or weaker magnet sound of the Duncan. So you can actually take a magnet in the pickup and actually kind of demagnetize it to make it act like, you know, an older pickup that's maybe lost some of its strength. But DiMarzio went at it a different way, using a fully charged Alnico 5 magnet, but creating an air gap between the magnet and the pole pieces to get a similar effect, sort of a degaussed sound, but with a clear open tone and a more stable magnetic field than you could get out of a degaussed magnet. So that design actually ended up winning out first. He was liking the custom. They ended up making a pickup that he liked a little more. That's the one that's in this guitar. And it's got the A5 kind of, you know, air gap thing going on, which, by the way, DiMarzio patented evidently. Now, one of the deals with making pickups for this guitar was they wanted the pickups to be exclusive to the guitar. These pickups are not available as aftermarket pickups. You can't buy them. They're only made for these guitars. But the closest one, supposedly, in the DiMarzio line, and it's relatively close, supposedly, is the Air Norton neck pickup. It features the air gap, A5 magnet, all that stuff. So the harder thing to nail, I think, was the bridge pickup. They set about doing an A5, Alnico 5 magnet design, but with sort of rich mids and a warm high end, something Eddie liked out of A2 style magnets. And so I don't know how they got there, but I guess they were just experimenting with wines and stuff like that. And they ended up getting closer and closer with pickups that he liked more. And they ended up with two pickups that they were happy with. And Ed ended up with Steve Lukather one day, evidently going back and forth between these two pickups and two different guitars and trying to decide which one was the best one. Evidently, Ed was like, I don't know, I can't tell anymore, I like them both, and Steve said, this is the winner, this one. So that ended up being the design that's in this guitar, and the other one is actually what DiMarzio now sells as the Tone Zone pickup. It's supposed to be very, very close, but just slightly different than whatever this, you know, exclusive pickup is. As far as pickup height goes, this was something that they worked on, evidently carefully selected by Ed. They're on the low side, actually, these pickups. I would say not super low. kind of a medium height, really, to me. But evidently, because he was using the Soldano amps, the higher gain preamp, kind of a hotter pickup, he still wanted to be able to clean up. So set the pickups a little lower, and then you can roll down on the volume and get nice cleaned up tones. As far as the neck goes, the neck was actually duplicated off of his favorite Kramer, the 5150. And who knows if he modified that neck at some point. Maybe he went at it with sandpaper or whatever, you know, and changed the shape. Because it is kind of a unique neck profile. First of all, it's quite narrow at the nut. I think it's like a 1 9/16 nut, which is even just slightly smaller than 1 5/8. I might be wrong about that, but I've read it's a 1 9/16. And it's kind of an asymmetrical back profile, so that sort of lends credence to the theory of, you know, maybe some sanding going on at some point, or maybe it's just worn away by his hand, who knows. But they used what's called a 3-axis CNC to accurately duplicate the exact profile. It's quite vintage feeling, actually. I mean, the radius of the neck is a 10-inch radius, so that's not super straight or flat by any kind of modern standards. And the frets are kind of small. They used figured maple. This one's, you know, fairly sort of, I don't know, cross between bird's eye and flame, I guess. And Eddie always liked the unfinished neck, so they used some gunstock oil to kind of, you know, get the feel that he liked, but still provide a little bit of, you know, some kind of seal on the neck. He wasn't happy with their neck heel that they first came up with, so they modified it and came up with this 5-bolt design to provide for better upper fret access. The bridge on these is Goto, so it's a Goto licensed Floyd. Evidently, Floyd Rose Originals, they had some sort of exclusive deal, I think, at this time in history with Fender. So that nixed them from using original Floyds, I think, so they went with this Goto version. I haven't touched on the woods yet. As I said before, you know, maple neck, but it's a basswood body with a maple top. I can only hypothesize, like, why basswood. It's just really interesting to me because he kind of went from, you know, that heavy ash body of the original Frankenstrat, which is really a kind of a bright, sort of hard-sounding wood, all the way to basswood, which is a much, much warmer wood. So that's just the evolution of his tone, I guess, over time. Still got a maple top on it, so that's going to give you a little more snap, maybe, but, you know, basswood's a very, very different sounding wood than a hard ash. Hard ash is maybe most akin to, like, maple. Then you'd have alder being kind of, you know, sort of in the middle as kind of a neutral wood, I would say. And then, yeah, basswood being maybe the most warm. But, you know, higher gain sounds. Maybe as he got older and stuff, he just wanted, like, warmer highs. I think the switch was always kind of maybe a point of contention where he wanted it down here. But once they stopped producing these as the Van Halen model and started producing it as a kind of a stock Ernie Ball line guitar and calling it the Axis, the switch moved down here, you know. So this was something that Eddie obviously wanted, for the switch to be here. It's kind of interesting, actually. Some of the early prototypes are just raw basswood. You can see a picture of one of them on the front of Young Guitar. There's another one that had a route for humbucker in the bridge and 2 single coils. You can see the guitar assembled in a photograph, but it's only got the bridge humbucker, no singles in the neck in the middle. All right, let's get to the story of this particular guitar and how it got into my hands. It all started on a cold winter day in Guildford, UK, just outside of London. I had just eaten dinner, was heading back to the venue that we were playing that night. I was with my friend Henry, I remember, and I was approached outside by a couple that were kind of running down this driveway and yelling at me, "Wait, Pete, hold on a second, we want to talk to you." So this was a fella named Simon. He was with his wife. He was obviously a really big music fan, huge Van Halen fan, had been following me for a long time online, knew what a Van Halen nerd I was. He said he had a very, very special guitar that he'd had since the 90s that he wanted to get into my hands. We connected at a show a few weeks later, and he brought the guitar. I consider the guitar to be in my care. I consider it Simon's guitar that he's lent to me. I don't know if he considers it that way, but that's what I consider it. I want you to hear the story, though, of how he got the guitar. This is kind of a treat. He's obviously really passionate about music, Van Halen, guitar. Here we go. Here we are, Dorking Halls. Not too far from London, really. This is Mr. Simon Legg. And he's got a very, very special guitar here.
Okay, I'm a big Van Halen fan. I have all the records,
Fantastic.
the CDs, and the t-shirts to go with it.
We like Simon, he's a good man.
The guitar itself, I started getting interested when Eddie revealed that he was going to design his own guitar.
Yeah.
That started in guitar magazines, which I checked every single month, and got a few pictures, thought that's something for me.
Yeah.
So, what I decided to do was check it a bit further, and then on going back sometime, it was MTV's Headbangers Ball.
Yeah, I remember this.
And that was a rock and metal show, which was a little bit of news, and it was about a minute long, this video.
Yeah.
Eddie chatting about his new guitar, wearing it with a cigarette and a headstock.
Yeah.
And just how nice it was and how balanced it was.
Sure.
We get about 30 seconds in, blast away, and during sound check afterwards, I thought, that does sound.
So I found the interview that Simon's talking about. I remember seeing it as well, and I just think for historical perspective, it's cool to get the words right from the horse's mouth from Eddie right now. Let's check it out.
In his pursuit of the perfect sound, Eddie has designed his own limited edition guitar.
I really want a guitar that I could play on tour and on the records. That's exactly what I want. You know, not what other companies would think I want. It's kind of a boring looking guitar, but at the same time, I didn't want some like VX crazy looking thing. You know, it's real balanced, it's real comfortable to play, and it's basically what I wanted to do was just build like 20 guitars just for myself. You know, the quality of the guitar is great, you know, and hopefully 10 years down the road, it'll be like respected and looked at like Les Paul is nowadays.
I love when he says that it's kind of a boring looking guitar. I mean, from a marketing perspective, that's a nightmare. It's not what you would ever want to say about a new product that you're trying to release. But one beautiful thing that I know about Ed is that he was really, really honest, and he kind of had no filter, and he just blurted things out, and it was like honest. You know, there was an honesty to it, and that's worth its weight in gold to me. It's something I always like really appreciate about him.
I then went to see Van Halen live at Wembley Arena in 1993.
Okay.
And that's the Right Here, Right Now tour.
Right.
And so the show starts in darkness, and you hear the sound of the cordless drill going.
Yeah.
That's obviously pound cake being played. And then all of a sudden, the spotlight's just on Eddie and his guitar. And that has always stuck with the image, and just on his own, gold guitar, cordless drill, brilliant. And then 2.5 hours later, I was completely sold. Completely sold. Shortly after that, I went to my local music store, walking past on a Saturday afternoon. There was one in the window. Music man, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I thought, that looks nice. But I thought, actually, there's quite a few people in there, and I don't really want to show myself up in front of several hairy guitar guys, so I left it. Went back on the Wednesday, been sold.
Okay.
Disappointed, but serves me right for being a coward. I then decided the best thing to do was go to London. Denmark Street, which was the main street to get all your guitar gear. It was also known as Tin Pan Alley.
A dangerous place to go with a wallet and
Huge and a credit card, yes. So I went up there on the Saturday morning, first thing, and looked down the street, and the sun was shining on this particular shop. And in that window was a gold Van Halen music man. So I went inside the shop and said, please can I try out this guitar? And he said to me, are you a serious buyer? He said, everybody wants to play this guitar. So I showed him my rail tickets. So I've travelled an awful long way to actually pick up this guitar. So I would like to try it, please. Okay, he said. So I sat down next to an amp, brings it along to me, puts it in my lap, plugs it in. And I go, oh my God, I've got this guitar. I didn't know what to play. So I spent 30 seconds just tuning it, pretended to tune it. It was perfect tune. I thought I'd just bluff my way through until I could actually think of something to play. Eventually got a few riffs out. I played for about 5 minutes or so. And he said to me, you can turn it up if you like. I thought, don't really want to commit myself. I'd love to turn up to 11 and play the intro to Panama or something like that. It was never going to happen. But it was done deal. It was sold. I mean, it's such a nice thing. The neck was lovely. It was all I thought it would be in raw. So out came the credit card. I bought it. Straight on the train home. Straight to my room. Plugged in my little Fender 25-watt amp. I got out my little Hot Licks instructional DVDs, actually cassette tapes at the time.
Right.
And so I started learning my little Van Halen tracks, and that was basically it. That's how
So cool.
it started. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. So that's the story, basically. So
Well, I guess you should show it to us. And we'll
all.
take a look here.
Here we go.
Look at that.
There's not a mark on it.
That's just amazing, man. I remember, I mean, this, you know, it's the exact same time period. I remember seeing the ad for the guitar, probably in Guitar Player magazine when it first came out, Guitar World, where he said, you know, my last guitar, what did it say? You know, he said, I can't remember, but then it said I designed this big difference.
You've still got the plastic on the plate, man. That's wild. It's like a brand new. I do that too, by the way. I leave plastic on everything.
Even some a little bit on the case edges.
That's amazing. And there you have it. Thanks so much for watching my video, little historical video on the Eddie Van Halen Music Man signature model guitar. Just a really, really cool piece of rock and roll guitar history, of Van Halen history. And special thanks to Simon for allowing me to interview him and for his passion about guitar, about Van Halen and this guitar in particular. I'm sure you can see yourself, if you've made it this far in this video, in his story and in his sort of passion for Van Halen and for music and for guitar. This is the stuff that makes the world go round for us. And it's just really, really fun, and it's kind of magic, right? There's people all over the world that kind of have the same feeling, and that's something that music does, is brings people together, and there's just this shared kind of community to it, and I just think it's wonderful. So anyways, please hit subscribe if you haven't. Hit the little bell beside the subscribe so you can get alerts when I put out more videos. There's more videos coming real soon about more fun guitar-related stuff. I am Pete Thorne. Take care, guys. Over and out.